I am with Dr. Evil Keith Beardsley here in Ottawa with the House of Commons in the background. And it's time, Keith, for the year review of our glorious federal leaders here in Canada. Should we stop at the top or the bottom?
I'll start at the top. We'll go with Harper.
Okay.
Been a good year for him. He's managed to get through what he needed. He hasn't really had much opposition. The opposition is still very, very weak, which is one reason he's done as well as he had. He's trampled on democracy a little bit with his omnibus bills, but again, he's able to get away with it because there's no effective opposition. So he's had a good year. He's managed to put together some treaties, some trade deals, all important, of course, for Canada as far as the economy goes. And that's really it. He has not had a tough year. He's not had to struggle. He's not had to fight the opposition too hard. So for him, it's been a good year. For Conservatives, they would be patting themselves on the back and say they've kept the socialist hordes away from the city and kept them from coming through the gates of the city, so they're happy.
Now, is it a combination of them beating the lefty liberal media into submission and pouring lots of money with things like the Canada Economic Action Plan? Is he getting a free pass from the media?
No, he's not getting a free pass from the media, but don't forget the media will also go on stories that are generated by the opposition. And to date, there hasn't been much. Now, whether it's, it does take a while, having run a research team, I know it takes a while to get people up and running and teach them the research skills they need to dig up the stuff around Parliament Hill. So that's maybe part of what Mulcair's issue is at this point. But the opposition are what generate a lot of the news, and at this point in time, they're not doing it. They will attack what's in the news today, but they're not generating news themselves. So until they're able to do that, Harper basically does the same thing we did when I was there. You look at the news in the morning, decide what talk points you're going to push back on, and you go from there. It's when you get blindsided by the opposition coming up with new stuff that the reporters jump in, and then becomes a sort of a catch-22. Everybody's piling on. But for now, he hasn't had that, so it's almost a free ride.
So considering your specialized background in politics, what's your fearless forecast for 2013? If you were guiding Mr. Harper or advising him, what would you be focusing on for the new year?
Well, I think for the new year, it's basically the Liberals who will be the next leader. I mean, at this point, it looks like Trudeau, but there's no guarantee of that. Conventions have a funny way of going sideways on occasions. But assuming it is Trudeau, that would be the number one target, to watch his popularity, watch if the polls change and if the Liberals start to rise. So this becomes part of the issue, and at the same time, you don't want to beat up on Trudeau too much, because if he is rising, you want that split vote. You want some of the voters to go Liberal, some to go NDP. Basically, same situation, but the reverse for when you had Chrétien power and the Tories and the Reformers were going at each other's throats. So it's just a repeat of that, but in this case, it would be the left wing making the same mistakes we made on the right wing. So that would be the big issue, I think, is the Liberal convention, who comes out of that. If they come out with a Garneau or Martin Cauchon, who's supposed to be declaring himself today, which is much more right-wing, then it could, as far as the Conservatives go, drift off some of their votes, some of the red Tories, and that could end up going Liberal. Something like Roy McMurtry mentioned, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, that he was even considering doing a long-time Tory. So these are issues that he's got to watch. He has to watch Mulcair. People who know Mulcair, and I know people who've worked with him, he's an exceptionally able performer. He's a tough competitor. If he starts to get his game together, if his team solidifies, gets a bit more experience under it, he himself can also become quite an effective challenger. So this is Harper's game plan. It's a little bit of wait and see what happens to the Liberals in January. See how that sort of convention and that whole process evolves. Who are the competitors? I mean, there's a couple of fairly good Liberals in there. Now, whether or not they can attract the population in this new so-called supporter class of voter, which is the big unknown in the Liberal in that particular race. I mean, and that really is going to be part of it. When a supporter has the same voting rights as a party member, you have really no idea who's organizing out there and how they're going to swing things. So that's part of the issue. So for Harper, wait and see. By March, you'll know how it's all basically coming together, and then you just go from there, pick your targets and go for it.
All right, our next leader, the leader of opposition, the Lion of Outremont himself, Thomas Mulcair. How was his 2012, and what do you see for him in 2013?
Well, I think with Thomas, I would say I'm very disappointed. I thought he'd be a far better opposition leader than he has been to date. And I don't think that's a lack of ability. I think at this point he's trying to figure out his role and figure out how he's going to perform in his role. And I think that's probably more the key, is fine to be an opposition leader. And now I noticed with Thomas, and if you go back over the last few months, he's got that silly little podium that he puts his notes on, and I don't see the point of that at all. It really, it makes for bad TV if you're just a blue-collar worker watching, and it makes him look rather elitist. He would spend a lot of time reading his questions as opposed to just speaking from the heart, just speaking off, sort of off the cuff almost, which is what he's very good at. Now I did notice the last week, he was getting away from that, and as far as being an opposition leader and questioner goes, he was much more effective. So I think he'll come together. I think he'll probably look at himself, and he should be doing what Harper does actually. Harper looks at him, or at least when I was there, would study himself and see how he performed in question period before he went into the next question period. Every question period was taped, so he could review himself and how he answered and so on. And this is what Mulcair should be doing as well.
The Peter Van Loan incident, was that taking a John Kretchen page and applying it, did that help him or hurt him?
Probably hurts him in the long run. I think it was just a plain dumb move. But it's a very emotional place in there, especially right now. It's very nasty. And I think emotions just got the better of Van Loan, and he sort of stomped across the aisle. But this is part of the problem when the Speaker allows that type of behavior, not so much that behavior, but that type of attitude and atmosphere in the House. And it's up to the Speaker to start clamping down and getting rid of some of the nonsense.
All right, for the Liberals, we're going to go with Justin Trudeau because I know it's our job to fluff up some other people and talk about it so it doesn't get too boring, but I don't see anybody beating him.
Not yet, I don't.
So how was his 2012, and what do you predict for 2013 for Justin?
Probably, the next leader of the Liberal Party. I think what will be interesting with Justin, and for those of us who watch it, he has a couple of good debaters coming in there now. In particular, if Cochon comes in, Cochon's very experienced. He's got a lot of House experience, a lot of debate experience. He can put Justin through the ringer when it comes to policy and debates. So we have a few people out there now who can at least challenge him on the debate format. Probably can't challenge him as far as winning and beating him by the number of votes. But that for us will be interesting because it will give Justin a chance to prove that he's not just fluff, that he actually has some solid background to him, some solid opinions, and he's not always shooting from the cuff and getting himself in trouble.
All right, and last but certainly not least, the Green Party leader, Elizabeth May.
I think she just keeps plugging away. Part of her problem is she keeps focusing on the environment, and I've always said this with the Green Party, and what a lot of people don't realize, when the Green Party was starting to come into its own nationally, there were quite a few red Tories that were involved in it. And matter of fact, one of the original, I think its title at that point was executive director, had been one of Joe Clark's top advisors who went over to the Green Party and helped them get organized. So they have a lot to say. There's a lot there that is similar to sort of the former progressive conservative type of platform. But as long as she keeps just talking the environment and focusing on that, it becomes a one-trick pony. And at this point, she's got to expand that. She's got to bring in other areas, bring in other people, because it's not just herself. I mean, there are other people who can be spokespersons for the party. So she has a good chance to flesh out, concentrate on a few issues, but get away from just the environmental. Go basically broader, go more on the economic side of it as well.
And as someone that handled question period for prime ministers, do you think she handled her limited time in question period well?
She does. They're actually fairly well, and she doesn't get that many questions, but again, make her questions a little sharper, a little shorter, and spread out your issues. Don't just go on what the media is going on, come up with your own, and that'll be part of the problem for the Green, is having that type of research ability, which they don't really have now. They don't have a large budget. But that's going to be the other key for them, and with the Greens, usually you have a fair volunteer base. So look at some of that. Try getting volunteers organized and doing some research. But yes, I mean, she's got good opportunity to build.
All right, and last question: any fearless predictions for the Canadian economy and the political scene for 2013?
Probably pretty much where we are right now. I don't think there'll be much change at all.
All right, Merry Christmas, Chris.
Same to you.